So in this paper entitled Progress is Back and co-authored with Marie-Laure Salles-Djelic, what we did was to convey the message that there was a big report produced by the International Panel on Social Progress, and we tried to summarize some of the key highlights from that report. So that report was written by a very large group of academics, scholars in social sciences and humanities from all over the world, about 300 authors. And in this paper, we make a few points based on this collective work. And so progress is back. The key message perhaps is in the title, in the sense that we argue that the notion of progress should not be abandoned, however worrisome the situation can be nowadays. And it is worth revisiting it and putting again some serious thought into what progress could be at the current moment of history. And so in this paper, we make a few points. First, we describe the way in which the collective work assesses the situation, which is, as we call it, an alarmed celebration of success, in the sense that there have been tremendous progresses in many areas of human development in the last decade, especially since World War II. And I can just mention a decline in poverty, especially extreme poverty, very long and steady progress in health and life expectancy, and also not so steady, but quite impressive improvement in the number of countries where some democratic forms and institutions have taken place. But it's an alarm celebration of this success in the sense that all these achievements are jeopardized. And there are many threats that are looming. And the way to describe these threats is to take the positive side of things. And that's what we do in the section that we entitle 3 Pillars of Social Progress. And we briefly describe these 3 pillars. One is equity, having to do with the reduction of inequalities. The other one is sustainability, obviously having to do with protecting the environment. And the third one is called freedom, but really it's freedom and democracy, and has to do with the quality of the institutions of governance, broadly speaking, not just in the political sphere, but also in the economic sphere. And each of these pillars is essential. So we must really make progress on every front if we want to really go forward. If we miss on one of these pillars, the others will essentially be endangered and will not succeed. And it's very easy to see why we have a lot of interdependence between the various aspects of human society, and failing on one of these pillars will really put us in a lot of trouble. And finally, the paper, which is quite short, the paper concludes by arguing that whereas some scholars put a great focus on inequalities of resources, and rightly so, because these are important, obviously, resources are not the only dimension that matters. And actually, perhaps more important than resources is the issue of power. And power is important not just because it determines how decisions are made and therefore what we do collectively. Obviously, this is the first reason, but also because empowerment for each of us is extremely important as something that determines our dignity, our possibility to be in control of our lives, and our well-being, broadly speaking. Right. So this is something that is very important for each of us, and a lot of social problems and social unrest has to do with people feeling disempowered by the situation, disenfranchised. And so instead of just following the traditional way of saying that resources should be redistributed, we believe that power should be a key focus, and not necessarily something that has to be redistributed by redistributing resources. Right? Reducing inequalities in resources is important, but power need not be and should not be completely correlated with resources. And so there are other ways to distribute power than redistributing resources. And they should, especially in the economy, for instance, in business corporations, it should be quite important to have more inclusive governance. And this does not necessarily mean that we should overhaul the whole property system in the economy. But this is something that is usually overlooked. So this is a brief summary of this paper. Does it matter? Well, obviously it matters to be able to imagine what the future of humanity will be. And so we are not making predictions in this paper, but really at stake in this collective enterprise that the International Panel on Social Progress was, is really the ability to help the process of transition toward a better world, and helping not by selling easy recipes. Right? The world is complex, and progress may mean different things in different places depending on the culture of the place. So the idea is that we really need to somehow encourage people, especially scholars, and around them, people who are in civil society, a lot of burgeoning activism that is taking place in many places, including in the business world, right? When we say activism, it's really a lot of places. You have mayors of cities and so on. A lot of actors are interested in this kind of thinking. And so I think the main goal behind this, this simple paper that stands as a summary of the big work, the main goal is really to encourage thinking and to encourage indirectly action based on some degree of optimism in the possibilities of humanity. From that, there are a few open questions that this work has left. And one of these, which is probably quite important for the current period, is the fact that it is very hard to identify the relevant set of actors who will be the vehicles for the new forms of social progress in the near future, right? So there used to be a time when it was pretty clear where social progress could come from. Social movements were more or less clearly identified. We are no longer in this situation. And this is partly due to the complexity of the situation, right? We no longer have a univocal, a unique vision of what the future could be. There are many possibilities, even along the three pillars that I have described. But also the social situation is quite fragmented. So many actors who are looking for change are pulling in different directions. And so now we need to somehow think more and research more about where the various social movements, social initiatives, and actors, change makers, where they could find some forms of convergence, some forms of building coalitions in order to implement some real change. Right? So the COVID crisis, which was not something that we envisioned so clearly in that work, even though we did mention the biohazard as one of the threats, but it was not the most obvious one at the moment. This crisis has revealed that it's actually very easy to just try to go back to the previous situation. So many people have been talking about, well, after that, it will be different and we'll build back better, an expression that is used a lot in many countries and by many politicians. But we should be skeptical because, in fact, there is a lot of inertia and also quite a lack of imagination. And therefore, it's not so obvious to see where the initiative will really come from. So I think this is a new topic that really deserves serious work. Civil society is presented in the report as something that is prominent, and we mentioned that in this paper, as something where hope can be found. But the civil society as it stands has severe limitations. First, it lacks global coordination. So it remains it is active at a level that is too local, too parochial, I could even say, compared to the level at which states and transnational corporations are operating. So there needs to be more global coordination. And also civil society is under great pressure. The rise of illiberal regimes has been very bad for the flourishing of civil society in many countries. And so as much hope we could put in civil society, we have to be realistic. It is under severe pressure in many countries. And so it is not so obvious how civil society could really be the vehicle for social progress. But somehow this is perhaps where we should be looking at.